Starship 36 went kablooey. And a lot of people seem to think that this should spell the end of the Starship program, or even putting together all the failures of V2 leading up until this point should lead to that outcome. But the honest to goodness truth is, that's not really how these kind of things work. And so I wanted to come out here today so that we can talk about it. Yesterday, SpaceX had Starship 36 set up at the Massey's test site, which is on the Rio Grande River in Texas. The plan was for it to perform a static fire test of all 6 of its Raptor engines. This is one of the last steps SpaceX takes before rolling a Starship out to the launch pad. Now, as they were loading the methane and liquid oxygen propellants into Ship 36, a catastrophic failure occurred. At around 11 p.m. Central Time, Ship 36, which is about 15 stories tall, erupted into a pretty spectacular explosion and fireball. Let's have a look at some footage from NASA's space flight of this event, and I would like to note that any footage or pictures I do use here will be kept to a minimum and will be linked in the description.
In static fire testing in addition to just flights, right?
How does weather play into it?
Like, would they static fire while it's raining?
Yeah, probably. I mean, even the other day when they... Whoa!
Whoa! What? That's not good.
As with all tests, a safe zone was established around the site, and so no one was nearby or hurt by the explosion. It also seems not very likely that the surrounding areas are going to be affected too much or at all by this event, but I don't want to rule out the possibility of debris or parts of the Starship having been launched into the air and ending up downwind. Now, for this video, I'm not going to go too far into the technical reasons why this may have happened. A lot of that is truly just because I am not a rocket scientist, and there's news about that everywhere. What I will do is link some of the reports and the sources that I've been reading in the description, so if you would like, you can certainly do further reading. I will be there as well. Initial reports indicate that the point of failure was a pressure vessel found in the nose cone of Starship. It's called a COPV, or Composite Overwrapped Pressure Vessel. And if we look at some of these screenshots here, we can see that the initial point of failure does seem to be near the top towards the nose cone of Ship 36. With that aside, though, the main thing I want to focus on here today is that in spaceflight, these kinds of accidents happen, and while they do come with setbacks, they do not usually lead to a complete shutdown of the program. And the truth is, I believe that this will also be the case with Starship. While this will almost certainly lead to a setback for SpaceX and Starship, like I mentioned earlier, it's going to keep going. Though the 2026 and probably even 2028 Mars goals are now not looking so hot. Something to keep in mind, though, is in the endeavor of spaceflight, things are going to go wrong, especially when you are on the forefront like SpaceX is. And sometimes there just might be an explosion. And while I will say that things have not been looking too great for V2 Starship in general, as this is now its 3rd consecutive failure, that just does not mean things are all bad. This time around, we won't get any flight or telemetry data, but I am sure there is still something for SpaceX to learn here and ultimately iterate on and fix, like they've done in the past, like so many others have done in the past. And what's going to happen is it will lead up to an eventual success. That is, after all, how SpaceX has been operating the whole time. This is not what the internet will make you think, but that's just how it is. You know, the one thing I will say is maybe it's time for them to revisit some of the changes, because V2 Starship is an iteration on V1, where they really tried to reduce some of the mass and material that goes into the Starship. But maybe they are going to have to backpedal on that a little bit, right? Like perhaps it's time to take some of these mistakes that have happened and move along to a V3 Starship where they make improvements built upon V1 and V2. And that is how practicing and getting better works, right? Like, even when you fail, you get back up and you try again. And so for some other examples of this type of scenario, let's look at some failures in the past and see what they led to and why some of them were so much worse and still did not lead to a cancellation of their programs. I would be remiss not to start with the Apollo program because it had a rough start of its own. On January 27th, 1967, during a pre-launch test for the Apollo 1 mission, a fatal accident occurred when a fire ignited within the command module. Astronauts Gus Grissom, Ed White, and Roger B. Chaffee tragically lost their lives as a result of this. What caused it were design flaws, including defective wiring and the use of flammable materials. This incident prompted significant safety enhancements within the Apollo program, a program which, by the way, went on to be very successful with 11 crewed missions and even placing man on the moon. All of this despite its initial failures and even loss of life, something that Ship 36 did not have. Now let's take a look at the Space Shuttle program, as it had its struggles too. On January 28, 1986, the Space Shuttle Challenger disintegrated 73 seconds after takeoff, killing all 7 members on board. This disaster was caused by an O-ring failure in the right solid rocket booster, which was worsened by the cold weather. This led to significant changes in NASA's management and shuttle design, but it does not end here either. On February 1st, 2003, the Space Shuttle Columbia disintegrated during re-entry into Earth's atmosphere, resulting in the tragic loss of all 7 astronauts on board. The incident was caused by damage from foam debris during launch, which created a fatal breach in the shuttle's left wing. This catastrophe led NASA to implement significant changes in their safety protocols. Now, both of these incidents very unfortunately led to loss of life. That is very sad. Yet the shuttle program flew for over 30 years and ran more than 100 missions. It did not end until 2011, very notably after both failures occurred. Now, these are pretty drastic examples, right? They're much different than what Ship 36 experienced, so let's look at a couple of examples that are much closer. In April of 2023, the Centaur 5 upper stage of ULA's Vulcan rocket experienced an explosion during a ground test at NASA's Marshall Space Flight Center. Like the Ship 36 explosion, the stand was damaged from this event, so the launch stand has been cooked in both of these examples. Yet the Vulcan Centaur is a rocket that flies today, and it has had 2 successful missions, and surely it will have more. And guess what? That's right, even our good friends at SpaceX have faced this before, as in 2016, a Falcon 9 rocket exploded during a pre-launch test of its own. This one at Cape Canaveral's Complex 40 launch pad. This also happened during fueling ahead of a static fire test, and while the causes are different, we all know how successful and revolutionary Falcon 9 is today, even after facing setbacks of its own. While there's no way for me to really go through every example in history in this video, I'd be here for a very long time. And while some of the examples I picked vary from Starship in one way or another, the results and the message is the same. Throughout spaceflight history, we have faced setback after setback, explosion after explosion, and even the unfortunate loss of life. Yet here we are right now, still having this conversation. And so if some of this here is not proof that Starship has a strong chance of both continuing and being successful, I suppose I don't know what is. I hope you've learned something, and let us all step outside tonight and look towards the stars.